Welcome to Drawing One. My name is Benjamin Duke, and I'm going to pretend to be your teacher if you will pretend to be a student. I'm going to be teaching largely out of my studio here, which I call Fourth Culture Studios, and I like to say that there's culture, there's counterculture, there's the reactionaries, and then there's us, Fourth Culture Studios. And we're trying to do it a little bit different. But just a little bit about me. I did my undergraduate at the University of Utah. I studied painting and drawing in addition to dabbling in a little bit of English and philosophy. I went on to get my master's at the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. And I'll put links in the description to my Instagram and to my website so that if you want to go and see some of my work, then please click through. Other than that, let's jump right in. I've prepared a slideshow as an introduction, and so let's go ahead and take a look. I always like to start the introduction to this class with these two quotes. The first one from William S. Burroughs. It is the function of the artist to evoke the experience of surprised recognition, to show the viewer what he knows, but does not know that he knows. It is the function of the artist to evoke. I like this designation that the artist has a function, that the artist here is acting in the society and on the society. This word function, to me, it's very machine-like. But what is the machine that's being talked about? Is it the way that the artist fits into the machine of the larger society? Is it merely the way that works of art become machines for thinking? I also think this word function implies responsibility. What if we switched it up and said, it is the responsibility of the artist to evoke the experience of surprised recognition? Another key word for me here is evoke. It is about the way that the work of art is a kind of invitation. An invitation to its potential viewers, inviting them into the mind space of the maker, inviting them to the party. This party is a game of discovery. The work of art seeks an audience in which it can complete its journey, from maker to viewer. Artworks create a discursive environment, the exchange of making. Discursive here just means conversation, the way in which works of art generate culture, generate those narratives that help us to define who we are and what we are and where we are going. Drawing one is just the first step in this game of making. The game is long and the rules are not defined because artists themselves make up the rules with each new work and in their very lives as creative individuals. Without freedom, no art. Art lives on the restraints it imposes on itself and dies of all others. Albert Camus. The Albert Camus, I think, in some ways is a little more practical for beginning artists. Without freedom, no art. To me, this alludes to the ways that there are no rules in art making. In that art making really is about creativity, in the sense of creating something genuinely new. Camus was a part of a group of thinkers called the existentialists. This philosophical tradition arose in the early and mid-1900s, really gaining popularity following World War II. Thinkers that are categorized as existentialists vary widely in both their thinking and in their forms. However, what binds them together and can even be seen in this quote is an emphasis on the experience of being human, of being a finite creature that is aware of its own mortality. One phrase that has come to define existentialism is existence precedes essence. This means the fact that you exist comes first, before any meaning that your life may have. And it goes further, implying that it is your responsibility to create the meaning that your life will have. Existentialists were largely looking to create an authentic expression, an authentic way of being in the world. And I think that the artists more generally are on a similar path. Even when the authentic expression is sarcasm, doubt, and nihilism. Without freedom, no art. The artist needs to at least have the ability to break outside the comfortable, clearly defined cultural narratives and historical parameters in which they find themselves. A deeper question here, at least for me, is this question of free will. Are we able to move outside the predetermined categories, the obvious stereotypes that seem to dominate people's lives and determine their choices? Art making and artists who are self-aware and self-aware makers can stand up to those sometimes overwhelming forces. It takes bravery to do this. It takes preparation to do this. It takes smarts to do this. This foundation level drawing class is meant to introduce you to a wide range of approaches to drawing as preparation for you to cut your own way as a creative person. It is meant to prepare you for the coursework that immediately follows, but it is also meant to give you the opportunity to develop greater conceptual and technical understanding of drawing as an expressive medium. Art lives on the restraints it imposes on itself and dies of all others. This is a recognition that we are always working within parameters, always already within boundaries, within narratives, within the stories of history. However, a work of art defines for itself what those parameters that it is working within are. It does this in visual terms, because drawings are primarily seen. It does this in visual language. In this drawing class, we seek to learn that visual language. The language of line, shape, space, plane, value, color, and texture. And also the techniques that have been tried and developed over time. An assumption in this class is that if I cannot choose between different approaches to making, then I'm not in control of what it is my drawing is saying. And I may not even be able to see what my drawing is saying. And that is not authentic expression at all, but rather the default of habit. In this class, we seek to make the work of art something that artists can work on, something that the artist challenges, develops, distills. The work of art is a tool that artists use on their journey of discovery. This is the challenge of this class, and it is a challenging class. Whoa, where's that strange echo coming from? This is the challenge of this class, and I think it is a challenging class. There's a lot of curriculum, and we move through the curriculum very quickly. But learning to draw well is one of the quickest ways to be able to externalize and materialize your ideas. Drawings can show you what your ideas really are if you let go of your preconceived notions about what you did and really look at your drawings. Making drawings is about awareness, an awareness of the parameters that we are working within. Our goal is to be able to set those parameters. In that way, we can start to talk about intention of the artist. Also, it will allow us to embrace or reject those parameters. The things that are invisible to us have an outsized power over us. Here, in the context of drawing, we seek to understand the boundaries of our own drawing ability and then extend them. I organized the class around this question of awareness, of where the information is coming from and what is motivating the marks that we are making. It's a recognition that a drawing is merely everything the artist did to make the drawing. So if I want to change my outcome, then I need to either change the way that I'm thinking about the drawing, or I need to change the way that I'm moving my body in response to that thinking. To answer the question, where's the information coming from, we break down our technical approaches to either information from the external world or information from the internal world. That is, translating the three-dimensional forms found in the visual field or generating those forms from imagination. Drawing from life, drawing from imagination. I'm making the proposition here in this structure that you will gain more control if you're aware of how you were thinking about what it is that you're drawing. I'm not making a claim that one approach is better than another, but rather I'm saying that if you set an intention, a goal, and then you lay a strategy to achieve the goal and execute on the strategy, then you can look back on your initial intention and compare it to what you did and then make changes. It is in this way that you'll be able to train yourself to make the best possible drawings that you can make, to extend your abilities and your sense of what's possible. Here are 11 strategies that we will take up, 11 practical techniques for translating information from the visual field. I want to go through them quickly here and begin to introduce you to the concepts. Some you may have heard of before and may be using. Some you may have never heard of but are actually using them. And some that might be new to you. But we will be exploring them in depth throughout the class. It's important to recognize that what we are doing with the drawing is creating an illusion. Two-dimensional art is merely a series of abstract shapes on a two-dimensional surface, the picture plane. If I'm drawing something that is representational, then I need to reduce and invent the shapes that will invoke the forms that I see before me. If I put the right value as the right shape in relationship to the shapes that are around it, then I will create a context that captures a translation of the visual field, translates the visual field into the language of drawing. A trained artist doesn't see something more real than the layperson, but rather they can choose to see the world through the language of drawing. We're going to start the class in our first assignment with a blind contour. There's an example of a blind contour. Then next week, we're going to move to triangulation and point vector. Then we're going to talk about sighting techniques, like sight measuring, checking angles, thinking about positive and negative shapes, so thinking about objects as just flat shapes, thinking outside of the names of the things that are being drawn or that are seen. We'll talk about the use of construction lines and construction points when developing a drawing. Think about organizing lines, a grid approach, vertical and horizontal traces, mark making as a spatial indicator, which we can see in this drawing, where the construction lines, the lines that were used to build the form, now start to create a subtle kind of spatial visual effect on the drawing itself. We'll talk about searching line. We'll talk about observed value, which of course is different than invented value. Down there with the little sphere where it's all listed out, that's invented value because it just drew that right out of my head. But it has our parts of light that we would look for in the real world. And we'll also talk about planar construction. In the interest of time, because I wanted to keep this introductory video under 15 minutes, we're going to look a little bit more quickly at the drawing from imagination. So I've jumped forward a little bit to schematics, but if we go back up, we'll think about mass conception. We're going to start that along with our blind contour. Then we're going to talk about cross contour. We're going to do linear perspective, including 1, 2, 3-point inclined planes, stairs, spiral staircases, 5-point, isometric projection, military perspective, cavalier perspective, etc. Then schematics as they relate to the figure, and you can see that image right there by Kim Jong-ji,
And if you know anything about uh, this Korean artist, Kim Jong-ji, he draws this drawing and many drawings like it just right out of his imagination. And schematics are a big part of that, but all of these approaches to thinking about drawing right out of your head are used in that. In addition to, with an artist like that, extensive experience from with drawing from life. Look into gesture and thinking about axis and angle. There's our 6 parts of value again. And having the 6 parts of value both here on the imagination side, but then also there on the observed value side kind of starts to, I think, make the point that these systems are things that we don't use exclusively necessarily when we're making a drawing. So there are ways in which we'll jump back and forth from system to system. I think that it's important in the context of a drawing one course to be able to really focus on one system at a time, do one thing very well, and then we might add to it by using another kind of strategy or method. We're going to dig into compositional systems, including dynamic symmetry, the golden mean, division of thirds, root squares. We're going to go into ideation and image development using studies including gamut, coincidence, composing in light and shade, hierarchy of shape and edges, and arabesque. Now, these are the kind of a list of the technical approaches that we're going to talk about. But the way that we're going to get at them is through each of the assignments. So as we move through the class, each of the assignments will be focusing primarily on one or two or three of the techniques, and primarily from one of the two pillars in our course, which is from the visual field or from imagination. But we want to recognize that as we progress through the course, you will be given the responsibility to select more and more of those parameters. So by the end of the class, then you'll be really making the real thing. Another thing that I think is really important for young artists to think about is the way that it's really important to begin to seek out works of art and see them in the real as much as possible. But the tradition of artists looking at other artists just goes all the way back. So, here we have Kerry James Marshall, a contemporary artist, looking at the Hans Holbein. You can see the kind of, the kind of stretched out skull in the bottom of the Hans Holbein, and then how in the School of Beauty, School of Culture, painting by Marshall, he's got another figure kind of stretched out there. Here we have Zoe Frank, a contemporary artist, looking at Diego Velázquez, The Feast of Bacchus, and the way that she is definitely, directly taking the composition and arrangement of these figures and some of the figures themselves, but then bringing it into her contemporary context of Colorado, and then using her friends and family in place of the mythological characters in the Velázquez. And so the way that artwork becomes and puts itself in dialogue, not just with makers and viewers, but also with art and previous artists themselves. We'll also be really thinking about composition. I mentioned this in the list, but here is a Cezanne, and this Cezanne, I think, is very clear how he is very intentional about that underlaying geometry that's creating the form. So we're going to have some investigations of that. Here's a few studies that some students had done in response to some masterworks, and we'll be doing some of those as we go along. And just to close out, we really want to think about the visual idea and this question, why must this work be seen to be understood?
Well, that's a little bit about how the class is structured. I'm really looking forward to meeting you either virtually or in person or a little bit of both. And I just want to thank you for your interest and your hard work on the front end of this. And I think if we work together and we each meet both of our responsibilities, can you hear my chickens? They're going crazy out there. So thank you. I'm looking forward to it, and let's make some drawings.